Welcome to our Savvy series. I'm Catherine Magana here with Rachel Ivanovich. And today we're going to have a discussion on what adult children need to know about aging parents in real estate. And this topic comes up a lot, so we thought we'd spend some time with you today. So a parent's home is often one of the largest assets, and a lot of decisions are typically made before and after death. And sometimes these decisions can be emotional. There's taxes involved. There's family consequences. And so while sometimes things come up and action gets taken, we want to be more proactive and educate you. And obviously, we're here to help you along the way. So one of the things that we talk about when we look at kind of the family home is anytime there's a big holiday, if there's a gathering, and I think that's often when people start thinking about the family home, and that's where you're raised, and that's where you do family events, and you kind of start thinking, okay, well, what happens if health changes, or what happens if if our parents pass away suddenly? Should we sell it? Should we keep it? Should we be added onto the title? What about taxes? And so while ideally these consequences, you're trying to make the right decision, it can be an expensive mistake. And I think we're seeing that. You see that all the time, especially with the taxes. So the first thing is kind of the house is really more than just the asset. It's really a place where you've had memories, you've had holidays, security. So there's a lot of that emotional tie goes into potentially the family home. And so sometimes the family or the kids come in from a different place of wanting to keep it or wanting to take ownership of it. And once again, should we sell it? What should we do with this asset? And it really ties in overall with the overall picture too. So can you continue to live in the house and sustain living there, or do you need to make some changes? And if you do make changes, what are the tax consequences? And we have some family members over time that the kids move away, and so maybe they're not as close. And so there's a lot of different situations. And also, what we're also finding, and I had this conversation with a client this morning, was the idea of, she's late 70s, she's feeling great, she's active, but she knows down the line, I might need some extra help. And so we're having the conversation, well, does that mean in-home care, or does that mean, do you want to go live in a retirement community that has the different levels of care and living? And those are some really tough decisions, because some people know, like, I want to do this, but some people, they don't. And so this is definitely a hot topic. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't want to go in a home, but it's really, really important to make decisions before it's a crisis.
Exactly.
And so the biggest mistake that I see with clients all the time is putting your adult children on title.
Yeah, just doing it.
Yeah, just doing it and not talking about it. And that's the question I always get is, should mom put me on the deed? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, time out, because usually the answer is no. And you might be trying to avoid probate, but you might create bigger problems if you don't actually ask the right questions. So let's just jump in and use an example. So let's just say your mom bought her house in 1980 for $150,000.
Okay. Nice.
Although I think my parents bought their first house for about $26,000.
As I say, it depends where you bought the house.
Yeah, exactly. So bought the house in 1980 for $150,000. Today it's worth $1.5 million. Mm-hmm. And so mom adds you to the title while mom's still alive. She's in essence gifting you the property, mm-hmm. and so that then creates issues with taxes, because there's something that's really important to know about, and it's called a stepped-up basis. Mm-hmm. And this really can mean thousands of dollars in unnecessary capital gains if you're not careful. But there are other risks as well. If you as the adult child get divorced, or you have creditors, maybe you get sued, then the house is exposed and mom loses control as well. So, we've seen a lot of situations where the parent can't refinance or sell the house because the child or the adult child has to sign off on the house too. So there's just simple fixes that we can do to that will avoid those complications. So I mentioned stepped-up basis and the taxes, mm-hmm. and that really is one of the biggest things that I see as a mistake. And so a stepped-up basis is basically, let's just say our example that we had was the 150. If you sell it before mom passes away, there's a bunch of capital gains. But if you wait until mom passes, your value, or what your cost basis is, it goes up to whatever the fair market value is when mom passed. So I mean, think about our example. That's over $1 million that you're avoiding in capital gains. So you basically inherit the house. If you turn around and sell it right away, you're not going to be paying any taxes, or there might even be a small loss on the sale because of closing costs and so on. And so that's why preserving the step up is so important, is because that built up appreciation, that could just kill you on taxes.
Yeah. And I think that's something that gets overlooked potentially.
It does. And people are often surprised because they often think when they get an inheritance that there's going to be a huge tax bill. But oftentimes with assets that have appreciated, the house, for example, it gets that step up to whatever the fair market value is. And then when you sell, then you don't have to pay any capital gains tax. So the question becomes later, not how much do we have to pay in taxes because you got that stepped up. Now the question becomes, should we sell the house? Do we keep the house? Do we rent the house? And does one sibling buy the other sibling out? But it's really important to know what the tax consequences are before you make a decision and just get added to the deed.
Correct. So what families regret most, what I find is potentially making emotional decisions too quickly. So, for example, if you have a parent or mom that passes away, so everyone's grieving, and obviously there's a lot of emotions and memories, and then you see, okay, within a couple weeks, they're cleaning out the house, putting it on the market, and one sibling says, "I'll just take over the house,"
oh boy,
without discussing it, or they spend time, thousands of dollars remodeling it when they don't even know if they're going to keep it, and so once again, if there's multiple beneficiaries, and they do sell, does everybody want to sell? And I actually had a family member that passed away, and the house was sold very quickly within 30 days. And it's very stressful because there's a lot of packing and moving. And so sometimes it's okay to pause, take kind of inventory, understand the tax basis that you just kind of talked about, review the trust, review the wishes, get an appraisal, and maybe have a family conversation about it, and not just, having one person saying, "I want to do this," and really start seeking the advice. And because I think sometimes everyone grieves a little differently, but what I find is some grieve where they have to take action. Like, I need to do something. Whereas others say, okay, no, I need the time and the space.
To process.
And it's not good or bad, but I do think if you can really be mindful and try not to make a lot of decisions right away, just be, pause for a moment and, like you said, take inventory and figure out what's next and what's best for everybody.
And what might be good is actually having the conversations before your parents pass and before the crisis is, find out what all the siblings want and make those decisions when you're not grieving. And the other part is, one of the greatest gifts that you can get from your parent is having that conversation and finding out, okay, where are your documents? Do you actually have a trust? No. Who's your attorney? How is the house titled? What are your wishes? And there's so many questions that you could ask your parent while they're still alive.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I just had a conversation with a client this week, and he is inheriting some money from grandparents.
Okay.
But the grandparents did not say a word to anybody, like the kids, the grandkids. So everyone was in the dark
about what the wishes are.
Yeah, but they do have a trust, which is great.
That's a start.
But now he's hearing hearsay because he hasn't seen it yet, and so they'll eventually get him the information. But now he's hearing different information, and so he's not really sure what they had in place and if there's different criteria, and so once again, I think that goes back to, having those conversations. And I think what we find is people are a little more open to it now, but I think for a while, nobody wanted to talk about money at all. And so...
Well, another thing, I talked with somebody yesterday. I have a client who's passed away, and they had a trust, and then they did an amendment, and then they did an update like 5 years later, but they never got it notarized.
Oh, no.
So now they're not sure which document actually... is the correct document or the legal documents. They're going to have to go in front of the court. It's going to cost more money. So having those conversations beforehand and then making sure you follow through and take all the steps so that you ensure that you have all your documents in place and your affairs in order, or that your parents have their affairs in order. Because there are other questions too. What are the wishes? Do they want to age in place? Well, or do they want to stay in their house or go into a home? A lot of clients don't want to go in a home, but how would long-term care be paid for? And would selling the house ever be part of the plan? And that, to your conversation, have those conversations with your siblings too, if you have siblings. And they're not easy conversations, but they're important conversations. You can have them lovingly.
Yeah.
And we all, often tell clients, you don't need to know every account number or everything, but you do need to have, a map to know, okay, what are the decisions we're going to make and how are we going to get there?
Yep. So there are 4 choices after inheriting a home. So one of the options is you can sell it. So this is pretty much the simplest one. You put on the market, you take the step up in basis potentially, depending on how it's titled, and taxes might be maybe minimal. The second option is you keep it as a rental. So once again, you still have to go through the exercise of getting the house set up and cleared out, but then potentially making sure you can rent it, and then you can set up as income coming in. But now your landlords, there's maintenance, there's insurance, and perhaps. But if you want to keep the property in the family. Another option could be is one child keeps the house. So if there's a sibling that already lives there, or if they want to move in and raise their family, so everyone can kind of understand the valuation. And do you buy out the other parties, or do you have it written in your trust that maybe later, somehow they're getting paid for that portion? So there's different things you could do or they take money from a different asset instead of the house. Then you have the fourth option, which is keep it for a little bit of time. Like, you don't have to make a big decision. Sometimes it's okay to take a little bit of time and figure out, okay, are we going to sell it, rent it? What are we going to do? And so I think that's okay to do that option too. Is just give yourself some space and time
I think that's
to make that
healthy
decision. Yes,
sometimes
exactly.
to take a pause
Take a
and
moment.
not make big decisions right afterwards. Yeah. So just a word on California property taxes. California families should understand Prop 19. So years ago, adult children could inherit homes and keep the low property tax base. So California has special laws about property taxes can only increase, 1%? It's a very small amount every year. But today, the rules that surround Prop 19 are much more restrictive. So if you inherit the home and you're the adult child and don't use it as your primary residence, the property taxes might be reassessed to the current fair market value. And so this could create...
And that's an expense.
That's a huge expense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Again, if mom bought the house in 1980 and is paying $20 for her property taxes, and the house is worth $1 million, now you're paying $20,000 annually. So that's a huge expense, and you have to plan for that. So just make sure that you're planning ahead, and just a lot of the decisions that you make might seem simple, but they really can have ripple effects over time. So real estate decisions, they involve taxes, cash flow. Like you mentioned, what if there are repairs and maintenance on the house, and you want to make sure you can afford that. And there's family dynamics, and then of course legacy, because you maybe grew up in the house, and so it's very emotional. So the house is not just a house; it's a home. It's memories. It's love. It's all of those holidays that you spent together. It's your family's history, and emotions are involved. It's really important to not make decisions really quickly, but to do some good planning together.
So if you have aging parents, or if you're the parent wondering how to make things easier, obviously we think these are the conversations worth having and thinking about. Obviously having clarity, being prepared, gives you peace of mind. And so hopefully this gave you an opportunity to start thinking about your future, or if you're going to inherit some assets potentially. And we are here to talk through scenarios. Once again, it's better to come to us proactive than reactive when it comes to some of the planning and tax planning for this. And we're here to kind of walk through that with you along the way. So if you have any questions, or if you'd like to contact us for a strategy session, you can reach us at 760-692-5700. And we want to thank you today for getting savvy with us about your finances. And remember to savvy up. Please stay tuned for important disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results, and the indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Savvy Woman Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.